Much is happening in Israel today, and we're very fortunate to have in studio a man who knows about Israel. And his name is Avi Lipkin. Avi, welcome back to Prophecy Watchers.
Great to be back.
Always good to see you, and we haven't talked for a while, but let me hold up a book that was first printed in 2006. It's called Israel's Bible Bloc. Now, 2006 to the present is quite a while.
Yes.
You announced your intentions in 2006 about the Bible Bloc Party. From time to time, you've updated us, but what in the world is happening now?
Well, what has happened is that the Bible Bloc Party has been officially recognized by the Israeli government as of May the 13th, 2018. In other words, on the 70th anniversary of Israel's existence, the Bible Bloc comes into existence. And we don't know exactly the date of our next elections, but we will be in the running for the next elections, God willing.
Now, with that as a basis, I want you to give us a general idea of what's happening in Israel today. And by that, I mean, in America, we read about politics from time to time, political parties, and recently, our president, along with Benjamin Netanyahu, has done something very, very interesting, moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, which I think probably is a preliminary step for what comes next. Tell us what's going on in Israel.
Well, after President Trump transferred the embassy to Jerusalem from Tel Aviv, Guatemala moved its embassy, Paraguay moved its embassy. We now have about 10 different countries in the process of moving their embassies. There's a logistics involved here.
Yes.
And so we're going to have more and more embassies coming to Jerusalem. You know, in the past, and I've said this on your shows in the past, the relations between Israel and the United States were ambivalent. Why were they ambivalent? Because, for example, the relationship between the Israeli military and the American military, they march in lockstep. The Congress, bipartisan support for Israel, 80% of Congress supports Israel. The problem always was with the State Department. The State Department was virulently anti-Israel, on the verge of anti-Semitic. The President of the United States always had to be ambivalent because he had to follow the directives both of the military and the State Department. Today, we have President Trump, praise God, who is definitely not ambivalent, and he's very pro-Israel. And we have Pompeo, who is Secretary of State. He's pro-Israel, Bible believer. And I mean, I think that the relationship today between Israel and the United States is better than it ever has been. And I consider it God's hand.
You know, we do see some miraculous things happening, I think, in the Middle East right now. Of course, those of us who read the Bible understand that the Old Testament talks about, what we call the Old Testament talks about Israel past, present, and future. It's devoted to Israel. And there's no ambivalence there. God has an opinion concerning Israel, and he's very quick to state it. And those of us who believe the Bible flatly believe that Israel is going to come into dominance. And that's why we're interested in the political comings and goings of Israel, because we're just kind of watching to see what's happening with biblical interest, shall we say.
You know, in the book of Exodus, I believe it's 17:10, there is a battle between Israel and Amalek. And God says to Israel, you be still. I'm going to fight for you.
Wow.
God is going to fight for us. Now, what we see today is two countries, Egypt and Jordan, made peace with Israel. Today, our relations with Egypt are also better than ever. I mean, you have to remember, we were fighting Egypt from 1948 to 1977, basically. We were at war with them till we made peace with them. Today, the Egyptian military marches in lockstep with the Israeli military. And whereas at the beginning of the peace process, Egyptians really were not allowed to visit Israel, today You go down to the airport in Tel Aviv, and you see all these Egyptian Coptic priests. All of a sudden, the Egyptian population is like 80, 90 million. You have about 10, 15 million Coptic Christians. They're coming to Israel now. We feel their presence in the streets of Jerusalem, praise God. So tourism is beginning from Egypt. We have an excellent relationship with them. By the way, the Egyptians have a problem with ISIS. ISIS is still alive and well in Sinai, peninsula of Sinai. The Egyptians give the coordinates to the Israeli Air Force, and the Israeli Air Force bombs the heck out of the ISIS people. So today, Egypt, and I don't know what's going to be tomorrow, but today, Egypt and Israel are allies. Jordan had no water in its taps 50 years ago when I moved to Israel. Today, the Jordanians have 24/7 water provided by Israel from our desalination plants and the Sea of Galilee. Even the 1.6 million Syrian refugees living in Jordan have their water provided to them by Israel. So Jordan is blessed in other ways also by having peace with Israel. Now, Syria and Iraq are still at war with Israel. So what does God say? I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. So if Syria and Iraq don't want to make peace with Israel, they're cursing Israel. Therefore, God curses them. Look at the mess in Syria. Look at the mess in Iraq. And so I think that any country that tries to touch Israel is touching the apple of God's eye, as we see in Zechariah 2:12.
Well, there are places where they stand up and shout death to Israel, death to America, chant for hours, Iran would be at the top of that list, I think.
And they're not blessed.
And they're not blessed.
By the way, Iran is running out of water. I don't think that the Iranian regime is going to last very long because the people in Iran turn the tap on to get mud, if they get anything.
Wow.
If they would only make peace with Israel, Israel would provide them with desalination plants and they'd have plenty of water.
I think those of you who are not familiar with this idea, maybe you have never tuned into Prophecy Watchers before, maybe you've never met Avi, but he and I are discussing something we believe in, that the Bible is very firm about, that I will bless those who bless you, I'll curse those who curse you. God said that to Abraham and to all Israel for all time, and you and I believe that.
Absolutely.
But the world at large does not believe that.
Ignorance. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Hosea 4, verse 6. I have to tell you, the situation today in the Middle East is so good for Israel compared to what it was 50 years ago when I went there. Don't forget that Russia was then the Soviet Union. In other words, 350 million people in the Soviet Union, 200 million were Turkic Muslims. So the Soviet Union actually was a Muslim country. It was virulently communist and anti-Israel, and the East European countries were forced to be anti-Israel. Today, look at Russia. Russia's pro-Israel. The Eastern Bloc is pro-Israel. So today, they're not the enemy. They're friends now. I'm looking at the Arab world, the Islamic world, the Russian-centered area. These countries all support Israel now, except for Syria and Iraq and Iran. And these countries are paying for their intransigence against God.
Indeed. Now, you brought up Russia, and Russia, as we make this, is in the news. Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump stood up together and created a furor, which is still fulminating as we speak. And we look at that and we wonder, because Russia is mentioned prominently in the Old Testament, not as a friend of Israel, but the land of Russia or the territory of Russia and all the provinces are mentioned in prophecy as being against Israel. And God says, I'm against you because you're against Israel, essentially. Right. So what's going on here? How does Israel look at Russia today, and how does Israel view the Trump-Putin meetings?
Well, you remember that I used to work very closely with Chuck Missler, and rest in peace. And Chuck Missler was always talking about, the Soviet Union as the enemy marching on Israel at the head of 350 million population, 200 million of which were Muslims. But in 1989, when communism collapsed, and basically the Russians dislodged themselves of 6 Islamic republics, and by the way, these 6 Islamic republics, they're not fanatic Muslims, they're secular Muslims. Israel is actually helping them to develop their infrastructure. So these, including Azerbaijan, which is an ally of Israel, and these are Turkic Islamic countries. But Russia today is now free, after it has dislodged the Muslims, to become a Russian Orthodox country. And Putin, with all the pluses and minuses, Putin today is a firm believer in Christianity. Of course, it's Christianity, Russian Orthodox style. You know, it's not white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Puritan Christianity.
Parenthetically, the media at large still think of him as a KGB assassin.
Right. And one of the things I wanted to stress on this show is that I think that the American people, and especially leaders in the political parties, both of the political parties, need to change the diskette in their brains and realize that we're looking at a new ball game. Both Trump and Putin are Christian and nationalists. By the way, Netanyahu is Jewish and nationalist, but it's the same God, same Bible, Messiah is a Jew. And the real enemies are the one world government based in Brussels, you know, the European Union. So I think that the American people need to look at the possibilities of improving relations with Russia. I mean, think for a moment, if Trump started saber rattling with Putin against Russia, the Democrats would say, oh, that Trump is crazy, he's a warmonger. And I think Trump's doing exactly the right thing. I think there is a chemistry between Putin and Trump. There's a chemistry between Putin and Netanyahu, and there's a chemistry between Netanyahu and Trump. And, you know, I look at President Trump. I told you, I think, in a previous show, that in the 50 years I've been living in Israel, I'm still an American citizen, but I did not think that it was ethical of me to vote in an American election because I voted in the Israeli elections. I live in Israel. Yeah. And 100,000 American Jews living in Israel voted for Trump. And I think Trump is a godsend. I think Trump is fulfilling the Bible, fulfilling biblical prophecy. He's a modern-day Cyrus, in my opinion. And whatever he does, it succeeds. I think Trump has God's favor. But nothing interests the enemies of Trump, you know, politically here. Well, and I look at Trump, and no matter what he does good, media and certain political groups are going to come against President Trump. I think it's wrong. I think it's horrible.
Nobody's neutral about Donald Trump. It's he galvanizes people.
But he will win the next elections in 2 years. I believe he's going to win by a landslide.
You heard it here first from Avi Lipkin. So
I said he was going to win the first election too.
Now, I think what we're talking about here lays out the groundwork for the Bible Bloc Party. The Bible Bloc Party now is poised to do something in Israel. What would you like to do?
Okay. First thing I want to say is that Christians today in Israel have zero representation in our democratic political system. The Christians today are 8%. In our system of 120 members of Knesset, there should be 8% would be 8 or 9 members of Knesset. There are 0 Christians in the Knesset. You have Muslims in the Knesset because the Muslims are an organized political group, and the Christians are a very new community in Israel because you have the 2% Arab Christians from the time of Christ, but you have the 6% Russian Christians who came in 1989-90, plus 6% of the population Jewish, married to these Christians or related to these Christians. So actually, my potential constituency is 14% or 14 or 15 members of Knesset out of 120. You have to remember, Israel is one constituency. It's not like in America where you vote for different parties, different representatives according to different districts. No, Israel is one district. It's one constituency. And every 45,000 votes gets the next member of Knesset in. So if, for example, our party garners 150,000 votes, we basically get in 3 to 4 members of Knesset. If we go under 144,000, we don't even get in with 1. And our hope is, since my list will be Jew, Christian, Jew, Christian, Jew, Christian, if we can get 150,000 votes, it'll be Jew, Christian, Jew, Christian. We'll have 2 Jews and 2 Christians in the Knesset.
Question, and to me, this is the main question. How are you publicizing your existence? Do you have a lot of publicity? Are people getting to know you?
Firstly, I have to tell you that when I got this a certificate that the party has been recognized, I got a call from a newspaper journalist by name of Arik Bender. He's, just a newspaper guy, interviewed me. And he wrote an article saying that I am an evangelist. In other words, that I'm a Christian. And what happened was I got so many telephone calls, by the way, not negative calls. And I said, well, I'm not an evangelist, I'm not a Christian, but I am an evangelist to the Christians, bringing them close to Israel. So they made up a new term for Avi Lipkin, the Jew evangelist. So
All right.
I'm a Jew evangelist. And what happened was all of a sudden I started getting telephone calls from Channel 10 and from I-24 News in English. And so I did 2 TV interviews. And all of this is free publicity. Then I got another call like 2 days before I left Israel to come here to the States. And they said, we want you back on Channel 10, but we want to know who your number 2 is because you said your number 2 is a Christian. I said, yes, my number 2 is a Christian. And the problem is that it's a young lady who actually now lives in the United States, but she's from Israel. Her parents still live near Haifa in the north. So I have to go meet them in Kansas, in Larned, Kansas, in a week. And we have to iron it out. Will she be coming back to Israel and running, or will her father take her place? I think probably her father will take her place. Her father is very active in the community up there in the north. And he's going to be my right-hand man in garnering support from the Arabic-speaking Christians. He'll be in charge of the Arabic-speaking Christians.
Where would you like to be in a year from now?
In the Knesset.
In the Knesset and expanding and becoming more public, and what are your goals?
Okay, let me say something, because the purpose of my party is to prepare for what I believe will be a mass exodus of Jews and Christians from the United States, Canada, and the West to Israel of 10 million people. So I want this party to represent Christians living in Israel, Christians who came from Russia, Christians who will be coming from the United States and the West, because I do believe that Islamic terrorism is going to unleash a massive war against the Jews and Christians. But I do think very, very conservatively that the word will be out in the street among voters in Israel, and you need 150,000 to get in with the first 4.
Most interesting. Israel is a different place. I'll never forget my last trip. I was standing in the old city at lunchtime, all alone, waiting for people. Stood there 15, 20 minutes, and at lunchtime in the old city, people are going this way, that way, and you hear every language on the face of the earth being spoken simultaneously. Oriental languages, you hear South Pacific, you hear South American, you hear every European language, all being spoken simultaneously. There's not another country like that on the face of the earth, I don't think.
Also, you have to remember, to be a politician in Israel, at least work with the Christians, which is what my plan is going to be. You have to campaign in Russian, campaign in Arabic, campaign in Hebrew, campaign in English. And those are my 4 languages. Also, I speak Spanish, but there aren't too many Spanish people who need to be spoken in Spanish.
Give it time.
Yeah.
It's Israel's Bible Bloc. That's the name of Avi's book. This is in a stack of 7 books, all by Avi Lipkin. Not going to talk about all of them, except to say that we have them in our online library, prophecywatchers.com. Just click on the bookstore, go down to Avi's name, and you'll find all of his books. And by the way, we feature some wonderful DVDs. Let's just take a minute and talk about your son, Aaron, who has produced some amazing DVDs that I think are very inspiring. Aaron is a very spiritual guy. He looks at the world, I think, through spiritual eyes. And I've talked with him a few times. I've gotten that impression. And he's got a sense of the reality of the land of Bible prophecy like nobody I've ever talked to. And it comes through these DVDs.
Very much. And, for the last 27 years, I've been speaking in Christian churches in the U.S., Canada, Mexico, Europe, and I've been focusing on the Islamic threat. But there is another group of people out there who are a threat also. And those people are what we call the globalist, one world government people, whose God is Mammon. They don't believe in God, they believe in mammon. And you know, Jesus teaches either you serve the Lord or you serve mammon. These people serve mammon. These people, in the end, I believe, the one world government people, they will ban Islam. Because I believe ISIS is going to take over Saudi Arabia, blow up the oil wells, launch attacks with weapons of mass destruction. And the one world government, you know, they don't want anything to hurt their income. And so the Antichrist does not come out of Islam. The Antichrist comes out of the one world government that serves mammon. So the next stage will be the atheists and the non-believers. And my son's DVDs prove that the Bible is not a pack of fairy tales and lies. The Bible is totally true. And if you just want to get the DVDs as a travelogue, it's a wonderful idea because you're there walking with my son. And he's lecturing from the Bible, but it's more than just a travelogue. This is like a lawyer in court making his point that Moses existed and Joshua existed and King Saul and King David and Solomon existed. Prophet Samuel existed. All of these things are proven by science and archaeology. So this is something very important that my son has done.
Just to take one of these DVDs, The Divine Choice, all about Joshua's altar. You want to see Joshua's altar? It's right on this DVD. Staggering discovery, absolutely amazing. Your heart will beat fast when you realize that not only is Israel a land of the Bible, but all of the original footprints, the track of the Israelites as they entered the land and populated it long time ago are still there. They're still visible. And you need to check these DVDs that have been produced by Stearman and Lipkin. And Avi, again, I just have to say that I enjoy hearing you and Aaron talk because you guys have a real feel for the land, a connection to the land. By the way, you and Aaron are going to be coming to the Prophecy Watchers Fall Forum, October 12th through 14th this year.
Looking forward to it.
And I can't wait to hear what you're going to be talking about. Of course, who knows what will have happened between now and then. And I'm sure that Aaron has some new discovery he'll be talking about too. And we look forward to that. By the way, I made a promo, which I'd like for you to see right now. Hi, Gary Stearman with a very special announcement from Prophecy Watchers. Bob Ulrich, we've got a lot to talk about.
We do. It's an exciting time to be alive as the prophecies of the Bible come to pass right before our eyes. Have a big conference coming up, October 12th through 14th. We're going to be celebrating the 70th anniversary of Israel at the second annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Forum at the Embassy Suites Hotel in Norman, Oklahoma, October 12th through 14th. You can register for the event at prophecywatchers.com or call us toll-free at the phone number on your screen.
And Bob, we have the top speakers in the world of Bible prophecy.
A conference like no other. 32 speakers: L.A. Marzulli, Bill Salas, Jan Markell, David Reagan, Mark Hitchcock, Terry James. The names just go on and on. 32 speakers in one event.
Not much time. You need to register now. Gary Stearman for Prophecy Watchers saying, see you there. And having seen what we're preparing for in October, we hope we'll see you there in person. Avi, we've got 3-4 minutes left. What's on your heart? What are you doing? I know you love Israel. I know you love Christians in America. You travel all over America speaking in churches. What's on your heart right now?
I would say Ezekiel 33, verse 6. If the watchman on the tower sees the sword coming and does not blow the shofar of warning, then if indeed the enemy does come and the people of the city are taken, they're taken in their iniquity, in their sin, but their blood will be required at the hands of the watchman. And so my job is to keep Christians and Jews alive, to help us in our self-defense and our self-protection, and to bring America and Israel as close as possible together. I believe Israel and America are one.
You know, on my last trip to Israel, at the ruins of the temple, and I'm sure you're familiar with what they call the stone of the trumpeting, lying down there in the rubble at the base of the wall. There's a stone engraved in first century Hebrew, beautifully engraved, that says, "To the place of the trumpeting." where a trumpeter, a priest, would go up and announce the day or various times of the day by sounding a trumpet that was heard all over Jerusalem. And when you recited that verse that you just did, I was thinking of the trumpeter up on the wall. And at that time, of course, that temple was surrounded by Rome, and ultimately it was torn down, sadly. But the battle rages. For you as a Jew and for us as Christians, we always see ourselves as having an adversary of sorts.
Right.
We have to be on guard.
You know, in Ezekiel 38, it says that this great war, this great battle is going to happen when the gates are open and the walls are down. Now, this leads me to think that America, Canada, are extensions of Israel. Because in Israel, our gates are locked and the walls are up. But America and Canada, the walls are just down, the doors are open.
And that's the debate right now.
Yeah.
President Trump wants to put the walls up, and he is severely reprimanded for that by, I think, most of America. I'm not sure what the statistics are.
By the way, I would say, you know, I speak Spanish, and I have a love for the Hispanic peoples. And I would say, bring them in, but put up a wall. Because there are a lot of non-Hispanic, non-Christian people trying to come into the United States illegally, and their plan is deleterious for the United States of America. So yes, you do need to have a wall. You do need to very carefully screen everybody coming in. A lot of people coming into the U.S. pretend to be Mexican or Hispanic, and they're Arabs or Muslims. And you know, how many years have we been doing shows? Like almost 3 decades.
Yes.
And the Muslims have been pouring into the United States. They're pouring into Europe. And you don't see Jews or Christians going to live in Islamic countries. You see the Muslims fleeing from those hellholes, and they're coming to the Western Christian countries. And instead of saying, thank you, Christians, for being such humanitarians and blessing us, and maybe we should even consider becoming Christians or something. No. They say, no, we're going to bring Islam here. And what happens is the country then self-destructs. So this is something we'll have to watch.
You're listening to our friend Avi Lipkin. We have a little over a minute left. I want you to, if you will, put on the robes of the prophet in the next minute. What should we be looking for in Israel in the next year or two?
Well, firstly, Israel is going from strength to strength. And when you said a gemstone, Israel, I used to say, is a flower in the middle of a forest, you know, of a desert. I say Israel now is a flower in the middle of a forest fire. And God has his hand on Israel and protects Israel. And Israel will go from strength to strength. I believe we will receive millions of immigrants. I do believe that Israel's borders will be expanding as the ISIS caliphate terrorists basically depopulate all the countries surrounding us.
Avi Lipkin, God bless you and yours, and we'll see you again soon.
Soon in October, God willing. Yes.
Yes, in October 12th through 14th. I'm Gary Stearman. You keep watching. We are. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.